Welcome to Let's Get Creative with Sam, the podcast. I'm Sam Rawlins and I'm a children's creative counsellor. That means I help kids unlock their imaginations and explore the amazing world of creativity. But being creative can also be a great way to take care of our minds and feelings, which is super important. In this podcast, we'll be doing all sorts of fun things. We'll be sharing creative tips and tricks that can help us feel good, interviewing other awesome creative folks in the industry who use creativity for mental well-being, and maybe even doing some creative challenges together that can help us express ourselves. So buckle up, get ready to unleash your creativity and explore how it can help us feel our best, and let's have some fun.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Creativity with Sam, the podcast. And today I've got a wonderful guest who I've actually spoken to before, but on a different kind of platform. And I was so happy when she said she would like to come back on. So let's get going and introduce Cassie Swift.
Hello.
Hi, Cassie.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
As always. And it's lovely that you were happy to come back. As I said previously, I think we did it through StreamYard and it was run through Facebook. Well, this is totally different now because it's actually a podcast on the Spotify. So it's really exciting as well. So there's been a few changes. You'll be really glad to hear that there's no dance anymore.
I was going to say, does that mean we don't have to dance?
Yeah, there's no dance because it didn't quite fit in. I was a bit like, but I was like, you know what? Let's just go with it. No dance. So yeah.
You have to introduce singing.
Well, if you want to sing, you can sing. I don't mind.
No, not today.
Okay, so the last time we spoke, it was very much about what you was doing at the time, but as I well know, you've done a lot of things from them, because I've done quite a lot with you as well, haven't I? So so I think it'd be best if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So hello everybody, I am Cassie, as Sam said, and I am a single mum to my three amazing children who are 9, 12 and 14, soon to be 13 and 15. Not quite sure how that's happened, but there you go. I also have 6 animals. We have 5 cats and a dog. And yeah, we went camping this summer and we loved it. So now we're going to be doing that some more, and I love reading and writing, which that's why I'm an author and have produced collaborative books, and I'm also very, very passionate about children's mental health and dementia and Alzheimer's. So in a nutshell, that's me.
Thank you so much. I know there's so much more about you, but yeah, that is kind of in a nutshell, as we all do. And so I can kind of think the reason that I kind of asked you again was, as I said, a lot's happened for you in that time. But I feel that as we grow, as we change, as we develop, that, our stories change as well. And this, the podcast is all about kind of inspirational stories, especially mental health and that family support. And I believe that everything you do is kind of connected to all that. So I think it'd be good to kind of let's start from the beginning. Do you know where the beginning is?
I know roughly where the beginning is. It was in school. Everything.
Of course.
Yeah. And yeah, so basically why I'm so passionate about children's mental health especially is I was bullied all through school. Probably should put a trigger warning that there will be sort of mention of eating disorders
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
here. But yeah, I was bullied all through school for everything, really. It was just an easy target. I put a lot of academic pressure on myself to get good grades and all of that stuff. And when I started losing weight sort of around my A levels, but it was a bit before then. And at this time I was losing weight, people started speaking to me. So in my mind, I was putting a connection between my weight and my self-worth, and that people would like me. Fast forward a couple of years, I went to university, and into my second year, I had to leave because I was hospitalized with an eating disorder. It was quite severe. I won't go into all the ins and outs of it, but it was quite severe. I was put in as an inpatient, which I was weight restored, but it led to more mental health issues, which included me starting to hurt myself and attempting to take my own life. So it was a bit of a nightmare, a bit of a disaster. Luckily, I didn't succeed. And I was told as a result of my eating disorder, I couldn't have children, which again was another sort of devastating thing because I always wanted to be a mum. And then I found out I was pregnant with my eldest, which was a complete turning point, you know, the complete miracle, a complete sort of made me stop and realize that I needed to change, you know, and that my children were not going to go through what I went through. And so that's where really my story, so nearly 15 years ago, took a turning point. And I was like, this stops. And I started working on myself, and going into recovery and, you know, all of that. And then my passion for children's mental health. And then I sort of started researching and found out how bad the problem was, and realized it wasn't just my children that needed support, but it's global. And so, yeah, that's where my passion led to try and help children. And then the summit and the books were sort of a byproduct of that, to try and bring hope. And you've worked with me long enough to know that hope is a really big thing for me. In my early 20s, after an attempt, I had a tattoo done, a Chinese symbol for hope, and my eldest's middle name is also Hope. So it is a very, very big thing for me to have that hope and to try and bring that into other people's lives as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it just gives me goosebumps when you said about the word hope, the real strong connections, and I guess that kind of empowers you as well, knowing that, you know, you turned your life round at the time that was the right time for you, but also, like you said, you felt that, I guess at the so that it's a real kind of like that vulnerability, isn't it, that you was in? Do you know what I mean? You was in that real low space. And were you able to access any support at the time, Cassie?
No, as I say, I went into hospitals. It wasn't helpful. Basically, medication was the only thing that they gave. There wasn't any actual helpful sort of counselling. You'd have art therapy, but it wasn't really. It was just, none of it was specialized or specific for what you needed at the time. Things, you know, I had a psychotherapist, and I'd particularly asked not for a male, and they gave me a male. So once a week I'd go and sit in his room. He'd start his little stopwatch. We'd sit there in silence for 50 minutes, and then it would go off, and I'd go, okay, I can go now. And that was it. You know, there was nothing. And so everything I did afterwards was through trial and error, through what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And, you know, they tried CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, which it does work for a lot of people, but for me it just didn't. But they were like, well, it works for 95% of people, it will work. And I'm like, well, 95% isn't 100, is it? It's not working. And they thought I was just being awkward, which me being awkward, surely not. But that was it. When the CBT wasn't working, they were stuck. They were just like, well, we haven't got nothing. There's nothing else. So it was very much trial and error. And then, you know, over the past few years, so still quite recently, finding out about EFT tapping and NLP and those more holistic therapies that really did make a big change fundamentally for stuff. So.
Yeah, and I've realised as well, holistic therapy is so much more. I mean, talking therapy is good, don't get me wrong, but I've had therapy for a long time, been through my own childhood trauma, and just, you know, went into adulthood, and then, like you said, it affects your self-worth, doesn't it, and your belief in yourself, and you lose your identity. You're just completely lost, aren't you, really?
Yeah.
So I've had therapy after therapy, and I've had therapists who have been supportive, and I've had therapists who, I don't want to be in this space, like, you know, you are. And I think I got to a stage where I just like, I mean, I don't know if I've created this word, but therapized, just therapized. That's it. I've had enough. I don't want to talk anymore. And then you kind of get to a stage, don't you, where there's got to be something else. There must be something else to be able to support me.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of explored holistic therapy. So tell me about EFT then, Cassie.
So EFT is emotional freedom technique, and what it does, so what talking therapy does, and as I say, it does work for some people, but I think it works if you know exactly what you need to talk about and you clear it and you just get it off your chest. When you're in therapy for years, what you're doing, the more you're just going over it, is you're re-embedding the neural pathways. So you're just retelling the story and reliving the story. And a lot of holistic therapies do is it takes away the need to even have to go there with your beliefs or your stories. So with EFT, emotional freedom technique, and tapping, you tap on meridian points that are throughout your body, and it's all connected with energy. It sort of comes from the Chinese acupuncture, but instead of using needles, you use your fingertips to tap on certain points, and it releases energy, like blockages within your energy system. So whilst you recognize what it might be that you're working on, you don't have to verbalize anything. You can feel it in your body, and then the tapping will calm your body down and release it from your system. And quite often it would then release things very similar to that, so that tend to get, because your brain sort of puts things in almost like filing cabinets. So anxiety, you know, if you're anxious about a talk coming up, or anxious about an argument you've had, it's still anxiety. It's still the same sensations within the body. So by clearing one, you normally find that there's like a generalization effect that will wipe out or considerably lower the other sort of issues around that. And it's amazing. It works for, you know, adults, children, teenagers, and it's been one of the biggest tools that I have been able to use, and that children use, although they feel a bit silly, because if you were to, you know, I can show you here, but you're not going to see it, but people feel
well, we go on video as well on Spotify.
Okay, so with tapping, you tap here and you go round, and a lot of people feel quite self-conscious because you're just, you know, you're tapping, and so it's when you know the tapping points, you can do it behind closed doors. But what I say to a lot of children, because you have tapping points in your fingers as well, that if you're feeling anxious or nervous, you can just literally squeeze the top of your fingertips, and it still sends the same signal to your body, and helps to re-regulate you, and to get your prefrontal cortex sort of back in a calm space, rather than the fight, flight, freeze or fawn that you can go into.
It is so incredibly powerful. I've experienced it a few times. I remember the first time I experienced it was with you, and the things that came up for me, it was just, even through the talking therapy, I'd never experienced out like that before. Obviously it brought the emotions with it, but it cleared so much, and that was just before I did the book collaboration with you, because I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Not doing it, can't do it, it's not happening. No, sorry, I must have said that. I must have been like a yo-yo. Yeah, I'm doing, no. I was just like, so you were, I remember you said something like, right, let's just try this then.
Yeah, and it does, and it's because it clears it, and it does bring up emotions. There's normally a lot of sadness, but that's a good thing, because especially as we get older, we've normally stored it for so long in our body that finally it's our body's way of being able to release it. And once you've done that release, you feel such a lightness, with it. So yeah, and I know that you went through your own journey with it, and it is incredibly powerful, but simple as well.
Yeah, definitely. So can people do it themselves, or do they need to train in it?
If you're going to use it just on yourself, you don't need to have training. There are lots of YouTube channels, and sometimes people can get caught up in what to say and what not to say. But if you're feeling really so trying to think of an example, say you've got an exam coming up and you're really stressed, simply tapping around the points going, I am really stressed about this exam, I feel sick, I feel nervous, and literally just speaking what you're feeling. You don't have to do fancy scripts. It's literally just verbalizing what you're feeling, and it will just lower and bring down the intensity of those feelings. If you wanted to, do more scripts, there's loads of stuff, online and on YouTube, but you can't, if you're going to use it with other people, then obviously you need to train in it professionally to be able to do it. But you can use it on yourself anytime. And another one, if you become really overwhelmed with stuff, I always drop to my collarbones, and you just go to your collarbones and just breathe. Just, I normally say in for 4 and out for 8. Just make the out breath longer, and it will just bring you straight back, just straight back to calmness within a couple of minutes. And it's really easy to do. So you just, and if you don't want to do that, you can literally just do that, because you're still just tapping on those, rubbing those points.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just about hitting those meridian points. It still has the same effect. And if you're feeling really sick, you can just rub under your eye, because that's related to your stomach, and it will ease the feeling of sickness as well. So
yeah, well, I've learned some new things today as well. Some of the things that I wasn't aware of with the tapping, but I do recommend it to anybody who's watching or listening today, and absolutely. And I think it's great that you can do it on yourself as well.
Yeah.
So the other thing you talked about was NLP.
Yes, NLP. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, which is basically, so neuro means the brain, linguistic is language and how you speak, and then obviously programming is how we're programmed. So it's basically how our language sort of programs our brain and our thinking patterns and things like that. So it's just about being very aware how you speak to yourself. So as an example, people might say, I don't want to feel anxious anymore, but your brain doesn't understand negatives. So what your brain is hearing is, I want to feel anxious. So instead of that, you can say, I want to feel less stressed, or I want to feel more empowered. And there's lots and lots of ways of using it. I mean, it's huge, and it's, making really little changes with things. Like if you have a constant voice in your head telling you stuff, giving it a funny voice. So when I was doing my training, my trainer must have thought I was nuts, but they were like, give it a voice, and they say always go on what your first instinct is.
Yeah.
Well, mine was Mickey Mouse on helium.
Oh,
So-
I love that.
So when you have this voice going, well, you're not good enough, and you start hearing it in Mickey Mouse's voice, having like taken in helium, it just makes it funny, and it makes it less serious. And so little things like that can really be huge, make huge changes. And just imagining that it's on a radio and you turn it down, and just really minor things that you pay attention to your senses, and if there's something you do want, sort of making that bigger and brighter and bolder, and turning the colors up. And there's loads of different branches of it. I could literally be here all day if we were going to go into it, but it's just ultimately it's about the language that we use, and how we rather than sort of being so like cause and effect, rather than being like really negative about everything, think about how we can change it and say, okay, this is how I'm feeling, how do I want to feel, and then focus on the want to feeling. Because as well, your brain doesn't always know the difference between real life and make believe, which is why things like manifesting and vision, like making your vision board and stuff and making it present, is so powerful. Because your brain, if you're like, yeah, I can't think of an example, but say you want a really expensive pair of trainers or something, and you haven't got them. If you imagine that you're walking in them, then your brain's like, oh well, we've got the trainers, and then something will happen and you'll be able to get them because your brain's already there. It's that sort of, don't look out for a yellow car and then all of a sudden you see yellow cars everywhere, because it's the way that the brain works. So it's just another really powerful but really simple way, just becoming very, very aware of how we talk to ourselves and the language that we use. And not saying can't, or adding yet on is something I always do. If I'm not able to do something, it's yet, because then you're saying, well, I can work around it. So it's just minor tweaks like that can lead to really big changes.
Wow.
So,
I love that.
Yeah.
So how do you use your tools to kind of support families then?
So a lot of the things that we do, first of all, and I still have to remind myself of it, is the self-talk. It's how we talk to ourselves, because it's so easy to fall into negative self-talk. And as another simple thing that we can do is we can wear a wristband. I'm not wearing a particular wristband, but every time you notice that you're thinking something negative, you take the wristband off, you change it to a positive, and you move it onto the other wrist. And when you first start doing that, you're probably moving it like 30 times a day, backwards and forwards. But what happens is your brain then makes a connection that the wristband means you need to change your thinking. So after about a week of doing it, just by touching the wristband, you will find that your thinking will flip to a more positive thing, because your brain is making the association that the wristband is, a positive, related to positive. And so that's where you really have to start with everything, is your mindset and how you think. And just tapping every day really helps. Like, even if you don't say anything, it just helps to keep your body in a state of calm to face the day. So if you're in the shower, and you're washing your hair, you've got the conditioner on, just doing 2 rounds of tapping while you're waiting for the conditioner to do it will automatically get your body calmer, ready to face the situations that come about. And again, being aware. And there's lots of different tools, but with tapping, I use a traffic light sort of system. I can't remember the name of the lady that invented it, but I've adapted it slightly, and I use this a lot with people that self-harm, because there's a 90-second window in which the need or the want goes up before it starts plummeting, and you sort of check in and you see whether you're at a green, amber, or a red. And if you're at a red, you go round the tapping, and you sort of I recommend like tapping about 20 times while you're breathing, and then breathe out with the next one, and then breathe in and then breathe out, like with each point, to bring you down, like to bring you back to a state of calm a lot quicker. But you can check in at any point during the day and just think, okay, how am I feeling right now? You know, not just mentally, not just logically either, like check in with your body, because mentally you'll be like, well, I've got X, Y, and Z to do, I feel fine, but your tummy might be feeling a little bit, oh, not okay. And at that point, just tap, even if it's the side of your hand, just tap for a couple of minutes just to recalibrate and reset yourself ready to carry on and do the next thing. So it's really looking at those fundamental things that actually make a difference, rather than the behaviors themselves. It's, you know, the stuff that you have to do, the groundwork almost, that you have to start remapping and reprinting and reprogramming your brain. And obviously the younger that you can do that, the easier it is. You know, when we get older, it takes a bit more time.
That kind of makes sense. That makes me realize that's why it's took me about 10 years to get to a real positive self-belief, self-worth place. Whereas 10 years ago, I just like, no, it would, you know what I mean? That was when I was at rock bottom, and you almost have to, and it might sound negative, but you almost have to hit rock bottom, don't you, before you can start realizing there's nowhere further to go downwards. So you know, you've got to find a way out of it, haven't you, almost? And I know it's not easy, and I know for some people they're not able to, you know, but when you kind of have got that support, just that one person. So I'm feeling for you that one person was the one who, did you have that one person to help you get out of where you were?
When I was very poorly?
Yeah.
Or no, not really. There was a lot. So my relationship with my mum, so my mum was like my main caregiver. We were best friends, and that broke down when I was, as a result of the hospital suggesting family therapy, and that completely tore our relationship apart for quite a few years. So it was only, obviously we did rebuild it again when, you know, it took some time, but it was mainly the turning point of me becoming pregnant that was like the I've got to do this now. It's not about me anymore. And it was that, you know, if it hadn't been for my kids, then I don't quite know. Well, I probably do, but nothing was really changing. I was just in a cycle, you know, a self-destructive cycle. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, this is for my children now. This isn't about me. And then when I was more open to sort of healing and going on a journey, that's when you sort of, the vibrations attract people, and you get different people within your circles, and you meet people, and and it was sort of, that was part of the journey. So yeah, but what I want to do is I want to try and prevent, so our sort of generation is quite good at sort of accepting what's happened and just sort of hitting rock bottom, and there's a lot of fibro and everything, which I believe is because your body keeps hold of everything. So Louise Hayes made a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's about how your body keeps like hold of everything until you deal with it. Whereas when you start younger, I'm almost hoping that the children can bypass that, because they will be dealing with their emotions as they come up, rather than pushing them down to a point that they do hit rock bottom. You know, they'll be able to sort of process stuff as they go along. I'm not saying everything's going to be fine and dandy, it's not, but equipping them so that they don't have to go through sort of 30, 40, 50 years until they go, okay, I've had enough now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and in some ways that's kind of similar to what I do. I work with children from 6 upwards, because that real early intervention is so important, so crucial, isn't it? Like you said, it's almost like changing them, that mindset as well, isn't it? So that they are starting to believe in themselves. So up to 7, is a real kind of time where they have that self-belief and that self-worth and things. And, you know, it's almost like this wonderful kind of time in their lives. Obviously, if there's a lot gone on, then it's changed. But
Yes.
I'm kind of saying it as a almost, do you know what I mean, overall.
Yes.
And then when they're 7+, there's so many external factors. And then that's when you start to see into that change in them, where they might become more withdrawn or don't believe what they're able to do, or anxiety creeps in. And now if we look at like where we are now in 2024, I mean, we had COVID, didn't we, a few years ago, and the massive impact on that. And I'm sure that you see that as well with the families that you support.
Yeah, it did have a huge effect. And I think it was more, I don't know, it's very different now looking back to how it was, you know, how it was. But obviously there was a lot, it was huge anxiety, there was huge bereavement, you know, not just physical bereavement of, you know, people that were being lost, but not being able to see friends and all of the sort of the life that they were used to. And it did highlight a huge amount. But also looking back now, for a lot of people, it highlighted, and I won't go off on one too much because you know my opinions, but it highlighted the flaws in the education system.
Yeah, of course.
And you know, when you were saying at sort of age 7, that's when kids become more self-aware that the world doesn't revolve around them, you know, there is other factors. But also in year 7, that's when they go into like year 1, I believe, when school really starts, and you need to sort of look at what happens within a school environment. Because when you talk to a lot of women, well, a lot of adults, really, anybody, their problems started in school as well. And so I think it has to be more that it's not natural for a 7-year-old to start becoming anxious and not as confident. It's the environment in which they may find themselves the most of the time, which could potentially play a big part in their self-belief and their self-worth and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So because of like how you felt about education and things, you made changes in your family, didn't you? So it would be better for you and your children. Yeah, definitely. There was two. Sorry, because we were talking about EFT, I keep doing this with my nose. Whenever I'm talking about EFT or energy work, my nose gets really itchy. So I'm not just it's just because I was tapping as well. It always, the energy seems to my nose itch. So that's why I started rubbing it. And yeah, I mean, school, I started seeing patterns in my eldest's behavior to what happened when I was in school, and you know, the withdrawal and the anxiety and just the system not being able to accommodate it. And you know, I'm not going to talk badly of the teachers themselves, because they are literally doing the best that they can with what they have. It's just not enough, but they aren't given anything else to be able to help, you know, help properly, help how they want to. And that's why a lot of teachers are leaving the system as well, because they can't do what they want to do. You know, it's become a very difficult situation. And you know, with the anxiety and the meltdowns and the constant being sick and everything, it you know, literally would be of a morning and my kids would be pleading me not to send them to school, and I'd go, yeah, you'll be fine, because that was the mentality, you know, you go to school, that's what you have to do. And then they'd be ill, I'd come home and be really upset, and that's just how we were existing. And it was like, what are you doing, you know? So it's a real exciting time, and obviously very exhausting and draining as well. I know that. Knowing you for the past, what is it, 2 years now I've known you?
Is. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And such a lot has happened in that time. So tell everyone about what you're doing now, Cassie.
So it's really exciting, and I can't believe it's the 3rd one. It's the Children's Mental Health Matters Summit starts on the 16th of September. And I say it's my third one. They normally run in February to coincide with Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. However, I lost my mum in February, and so there was a question mark whether I was even going to get to do one this year. But it's actually sort of exploded this year, and it is it's amazing. And it's strange to think, because I met you through the first summit, the first one that I did.
Right, yeah.
You know, the journey that's happened after that. But the summit wasn't planned. It wasn't something that I had thought, right, I'm going to do this, because I wouldn't have been brave enough to think that I was capable of doing something like that. It was like one of those sort of thrown in situations of, I asked people to come and talk in my Facebook group, and just the response was overwhelming, and so I needed to do something. And it resulted in the first summit back in 2022, which we got out in 2 weeks, and it was a very steep learning curve.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Wow, I couldn't remember that. Wow.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks from when the post went out, and then a good friend of mine, Heather, who's a website and graphic designer, I said to her, can you get a landing page for me, please, because I need to sort of try and do something. And we're now today, you know, where we are with, you know, we've got a guest speaker this year with Eva Abley, which she's a Britain's Got Talent finalist. But more than that, you know, she's a 16-year-old who wants to make a change in the world, and she's a really inspirational young lady. And you know, it's amazing to have that younger voice also sharing about it. And you if you come along, you'll need tissues. And again, she's sharing things that happens within school which shouldn't happen, you know. And it's amazing. So it's going to be over 10 days, and it's completely free. So there's, you know, 55 plus of us all sharing expertise around everything from, you know, so the first day starts with emotional regulation and empowerment, which is when you will be sharing your presentation. And we've got a teenage years, we've got 2 days for neurodiversity, we've got life skills where, you know, people are talking about entrepreneurship and money, even decluttering, you know, because that's the thing that happens, self-care for us, you know, parents and caregivers, home education and school anxiety, complementary and alternative therapies, which has things like hypnotherapy, tapping, oils within that, family dynamics, where you've got things like high conflict divorce and grief and bereavement, and then a day with mindset, and, you know, things around that, and taking those moments of gratitude and stuff. So it literally covers so much you know, and that's like the tip of the iceberg. And it's free because we've got enough, you know, there's enough going on with everything than another expense. I don't want money to be an issue for people not to be able to access help. And we got, you know, speakers from all over the world, which has highlighted, especially this year, just how, I mean, I've referred to the children's mental health crisis as like a pandemic for many years. But this year has highlighted just how much it is, because things, we think it's UK specific to the education system or the you know, the medical system, because not all countries have free medical services, but it's worldwide, you know, Canada, America, Cyprus, Australia, New Zealand, Spain. It's literally a global thing. So it's been really interesting to hear from those people as well about how it's different but the same, basically. So it's and it's been an amazing journey and a lot of learnings, and very excited and hoping that it just brings hope to people, because that's the point of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited for you, seeing your journey as well. Okay, so we come to the part where I ask you for 3 tips, if I can say it right. Sometimes my words slip.
3 tips on what, anything in particular, or
So,
on what we've
yeah, well,
spoken
no,
about?
really, not really. So anything that you spoke about, really.
Okay. Gosh, we covered a lot. Don't know where to don't know where to start. I think, you know, in regards of, you know, anxiety and things like that, 3 top tips would be to try and spend at least 60 seconds every couple of hours just breathing, just, you know, taking a moment out and making the out breaths longer than the in breaths, because that calms the parasympathetic nervous system, and it really does help. You know, you might think it's really not worth it, but if you just observe, you know, that every 90 minutes, because that's sort of the cycles that we work in. So we're told to only work for 90 minutes, you know, maximum, before our body flips and goes into panic. So if you aim for 1 minute of just mindful breathing every 90 minutes, and, you know, just also trying out tapping. I would love people, I'd really encourage people just to try it, and, you know, to just notice what happens. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But again, if you're feeling particularly stressed or whatever, just tapping on your collarbones or the side of your hand, and that with the breathing, I think most people will notice a huge shift. And I guess the third one would be just being mindful of how we think about ourselves. And if we notice a negative popping in, trying to flip it for a positive. And again, just noticing what happens. And you will have to be really consciously doing it for a little while. It's not going to just stop overnight because you've spent decades, you know, talking badly to yourself. So don't do it for a day and think, well, that didn't work. You've got to really start. You know, I often talk about it in, if you go to the woods or whatever, there's a path that people have walked down so often that it's just like, it's bald, there's nothing there because it's easy. And next to it you've got like the brambles and the bushes, and what you're doing is you're making a new neural pathway through the brambles and the bushes. So it takes a bit of hard work to get going until you sort of leave this one, and this one will start growing and this one will get easier. And that's how I sort of try and look at building neural pathways. So I think with the breathing, the tapping, and just being very mindful of our words, hopefully that would help people where they are now.
Thank you. They are really great tips. Going back to the one where you said an hour and a half, I recently went to Wales with my grandsons, and the journey ended up being 5 hours. I mean, yeah, that were enough on its own. But what was really interesting for me was the youngest one, he struggles with travel sickness. And do you know how long he lasted? An hour and a half. Yeah. And then that were it. Which you can imagine wasn't very easy when we were stuck in traffic. And but that's what really kind of stuck with me. And it made me think, so our journeys in future are an hour and a half. If we have to stop, that's fine. But so when you said that, I was like, that's really interesting, is that?
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I'd encourage you to probably stop an hour before you hit the hour and a half.
So you're not stuck, and then it works, just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah. And you can get as well, you know, have you seen those wristbands, just on a bit of a tangent, that they've got like plastic and they push on a point here, and it's to stop sickness. And again, it's because it's pushing on one of the meridian points, so it helps to stop travel sickness. And that's the reasoning behind it, and they do work. They do work.
I will purchase some of them.
So some of those you can get them on Amazon, the travel bands, and stopping probably every hour to an hour and a quarter. And you'll find, because mine used to get quite travel sick, and then after a while, after using the bands and whatever, they don't tend to now. To say that quietly. But it is, but they do help, because again, it's those points in the body that have the connections with stuff.
It's really interesting, isn't it? How we know, I mean, we now know that the mind, body and soul are all connected, but particularly like you were saying about how you were feeling, and obviously the connection, the feeling sick, and we know it's in the stomach because obviously that's the second brain as well. I really feel that we could have had a conversation for like 2 hours, not let alone less than an hour, because there's so much in there that just, there's been so much more research, but it makes so much more sense, and why children physically feel sick and have headaches when really it's this stress, isn't it? It's their nervous system that's just completely out of sync.
Yeah, they've gone, you know, it's say I'm aware of time, but it's their prefrontal cortex has just completely gone off off the radar, and they've gone back into that, you know, fight, flight and freeze. And you know what you were saying about the stomach, it is that they say like gut instinct and stuff, because there is a brain gut connection. So if your stomach's telling you something's not right, listen to it, because it's there for a reason.
Yeah, I use mine all the time. Go with your gut. So just before we finish, so where can people find you, Cassie?
So I am everywhere. I'm on all the platforms, but I tend to be on Facebook the most. So that is where you can probably find me the easiest. Just my main profile is Cassie Swift, or we've got a Children's Mental Health Matters Summit page, and you can connect to me through there, or my website. You can email me, or the Summit website. But yeah, I tend to be on Facebook the most.
Okay. We'll add your link in the show notes as well.
Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to say thank you, because you know me, I can talk for a long time. So I've just got to cut myself short almost. But thank you so much for coming on today, Cassie. It was totally different than the first one. But there was so much important information as well that I think will be really valuable for a lot of families. So like Cassie said, the Children's Mental Health Summit starts next week. I'm guessing there's still tickets available, Cassie?
Yes, yeah, you can still register on the website link, which I don't know if you're going to put that, but it's just Children's Mental Health Matters Summit.co.uk, and you can get your free ticket there. So yeah, do come along. There is still plenty of time. There's a Facebook group as well, should you wish to join it. But if not, you will receive emails with all the talks in. So
brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so yeah, thank you, Cassie. So thank you everybody for listening and watching today. You can find me on Spotify, my podcast, Let's Talk About Creativity, and there's lots of other wonderful inspirational guests I've spoke to as well. So that is it for today. I will see you all soon for another episode. Bye.
Bye.